September in Vermont is traditionally filled with stories of leaves changing colors and high school football under the lights. But on a bright September morning 10 years ago, the story for many young Vermonters was one of sadness, uncertainty, and fear.
But I knew things were wrong because my teacher was really upset and parents started coming and getting their kids.
On September 11, 2001, 300 miles away from Vermont's Green Mountains, that shared September sky turned gray over lower Manhattan.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, God.
There's another one. There's a second plane just crashed into the World Trade Center.
As terrorists plowed planes into the Twin Towers,
well, we moved to this house in '99.
11-year-old Allie Kravitz was in White River Junction looking for her mom.
So I guess I was confused and really scared, and I kept asking my mom if we were going to get attacked over and over.
80 miles north in Richmond, 10-year-old Jared Raftery learned of the attacks when he found his mom in tears.
My mom was sitting on the couch watching TV crying, and I was with my sister and her two friends, and we were basically asking her, like, what's wrong, what's going on?
For a little boy used to playing in the park behind his home, in a setting fit for postcards, the attacks were scary too.
Especially here in Vermont, we always feel very safe. It's a great environment. It was a great place to grow up. So to see that happen even somewhere like 6 hours away, it was scary.
Jared and Allie's memories of the attacks on New York, Washington, D.C., and Shanksville, Pennsylvania are like those of so many others who watched the horrors through young eyes.
Well, I only saw them once, the Twin Towers.
Allie says the images of death and devastation were the hardest.
I just couldn't believe that it happened. I thought it was kind of like a movie, you know, because I couldn't get it through my head that actual airplanes ran into actual buildings and killed actual people.
Mom Jennifer did her best to shield Allie and her three siblings from the terror.
We didn't talk about it a lot. We didn't really encourage them to watch it. We just, we told them they were safe.
Because he was around 8, then he was around 10.
The Rafteries, on the other hand, stayed glued to the TV.
We went and sat down and watched it with her. And we're just watching this catastrophe going on.
I was actually a little nervous myself, flying again.
Jared's mom, Aisha, was a flight attendant at the time. She's from New York City and couldn't keep the tragedy from her kids.
Parents were deciding whether or not to tell their children what was going on, but I needed to tell them what was going on because we had family there.
The Rafteries were spared. Their family was okay. But a decade later, Jared still thinks of the thousands of people who died that morning.
It was almost hard to believe that two of the tallest buildings I've ever seen in my life don't exist anymore, and that all those offices and all those people who worked in there and were there every day and essentially spent their lives there are now dead or very injured or escaped like by the skin of their neck, basically.
Horrific circumstances that in an instant, Allie says, tied her to a community beyond Vermont.
That was when I first started thinking about myself as a citizen of a country, as opposed to just like a Vermonter or someone who lives in White River Junction.
On September 11th, 2001, I was a freshman at Fordham University in New York City. When the Twin Towers were hit, I could see the smoke from the top of my dorm. These are some of the pictures I took following the attacks. Images and stories like mine didn't stop Allie or Jared from leaving Vermont and heading to college in the city home to the deadliest terrorist attack the United States has ever seen.
I thought about the opportunities in New York. I thought about the people and the cultures and the diversity and everything that I would learn.
What they found was much different than the candlelight vigils and boarded up buildings I saw years earlier.
It looks unreal. You go there today and this is not what you see.
And it's cool to see New Yorkers, as a Vermonter, to go and see New Yorkers and see how they're progressing and see that they don't let it hold them back from anything.
Jared is now a sophomore at Pace University, a short distance from where the Twin Towers went down.
I walk by it all the time, and I always just see the gates, and every time I look at that area, it just brings back instantly that memory.
He was at Ground Zero last spring when Osama bin Laden, the man behind the September 11th attacks, was killed by U.S. forces.
It was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever been through in my entire life.
An experience that continues to shape the 20-year-old's 9/11 story.
This one man stood up on the gates of Ground Zero with a shirt that said, "I'm Muslim, don't panic," and led everyone in the crowd in singing the Pledge of Allegiance, and saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and then singing the national anthem.
And has this been here since you moved here?
Allie is also adding chapters of her own, far from rural Vermont, where her story started. She's now a senior at Fordham University, applying for a Fulbright to explore Islamic culture.
After 9/11, I was very sensitive to cultural interactions, especially between like the so-called East and West, and I think that 9/11 and other events similar to that have really given me a desire to understand where they're coming from, as opposed to just saying, well, we're Americans and they are Afghans or Iraqis or whatever.
10 years later, as those bright September skies return, Jared knows the 9/11 memories he shares with other young people won't fade.
It clicks for everyone. Something inside them definitely changes and shifts, and it's something that as Americans we can all relate to and definitely bond over.
A bond that on the anniversary of the attacks, Allie says her generation can use to work toward a greater and more peaceful good.
Not just a peace on kind of an institutional level, but peace and cooperation and exchange on a cultural person level.
A big goal for a generation of young people turning the page toward a future where they hope September mornings won't go gray again.
I definitely think that we are the 9/11 generation.